Hospitals may say impossible. Banks may say impossible. Doctors may say impossible. But when a Spirit-filled believer kneels down and begins to pray in the Spirit, the impossible must listen. Why? Because the Spirit of God does not beg circumstances. He commands them. When you pray in the Spirit, you are building your inner man. Faith rises, fear collapses, hope is restored, and suddenly, what once stood like a mountain begins to move. Do not underestimate those quiet moments when you pray in tongues, when you pray beyond understanding. In those moments, God is rearranging your future. He is healing wounds you cannot explain. He is opening doors you did not knock on. Remember this truth. You do not fight spiritual battles with natural weapons. You fight them by praying in the Spirit. When you pray in the Spirit, you are not speaking into the air and you are not talking to yourself. Something supernatural happens. A direct line opens between your weakness and God's unlimited power. Many people live their daily lives disconnected, not because God is far, but because they rely only on their own strength. They wake up tired, go to work stressed, return home exhausted, and wonder why life feels heavy. But when a believer begins to pray in the Spirit, power flows where effort once failed. It is like plugging a dead phone into a live socket. The phone doesn't argue, it doesn't struggle, it simply receives power. Think about a mother standing in her kitchen early in the morning, worried about her children, the bills, the future. Words fail her. Logic gives no solution, but she begins to pray in the Spirit quietly while cooking. In that moment, heaven listens. Peace enters her heart before circumstances change. That peace is not emotional. It is power touching her soul. She may still go to work, still face challenges, but now she is carrying divine strength instead of fear. Praying in the Spirit connects you directly to God's power because it bypasses human limitation. Your mind has limits. Your vocabulary has limits. But the Spirit has none. A young man may sit in his room late at night, burdened by failure, rejection, and unanswered questions. He doesn't know what to say to God anymore. But when he prays in the Spirit, God understands every sound. Power begins to rebuild what disappointment destroyed. Confidence returns not because the situation changed, but because God's power entered his inner man. In daily life, we often see people trying harder instead of connecting deeper. A business owner may work longer hours, make more calls, push harder, yet remain stuck. But when that person learns to pray in the Spirit, decisions become clearer. Ideas come unexpectedly, doors open without struggle. It is not coincidence, it is connection. God's power is not released through pressure, but through alignment. Praying in the Spirit is like switching from manual control to divine automation. Imagine driving through a storm with poor visibility, gripping the steering wheel in fear. Then suddenly a powerful GPS with perfect vision takes over and guides you safely. That is what the Spirit does. You may not see the road ahead, but God's power sees everything. When you pray in the Spirit, you surrender control and receive direction. Even in ordinary moments, walking, cleaning, traveling, praying in the Spirit keeps you connected. A student preparing for exams may feel overwhelmed. Anxiety whispers, you will fail. But as they pray in the Spirit, confidence replaces fear. Memory sharpens, focus improves. This is not magic, it is divine power strengthening the mind. God's power doesn't always remove pressure. It empowers you to rise above it. Many people wait for power to come from outside, but God releases power from within when you pray in the Spirit. Like a generator that activates during a blackout, the Spirit supplies strength when life goes dark. A person facing sickness may feel weak physically, but Spirit-led prayer activates inner strength that doctors cannot measure. Hope rises, endurance increases. Healing begins at the root. Praying in the Spirit also connects you to God's power in relationships. When words would create arguments, Spirit-led prayer creates wisdom. A husband or wife may feel misunderstood, frustrated, ready to react, But praying in the Spirit softens the heart and brings clarity. Suddenly, the right words come at the right time. Peace, repla. CES, conflict. That is God's power working quietly but effectively. In moments of decision, praying in the Spirit becomes a lifeline. Choosing a career, a move, or a major step can feel confusing. Human advice may contradict itself, but the Spirit never confuses. As you pray, an inner knowing develops. You may not hear a loud voice, but you feel settled. That peace is evidence of God's power guiding you. Praying in the Spirit is not reserved for emergencies. It is a daily connection. Just like breathing keeps the body alive, Spirit-led prayer keeps faith alive. Without it, believers grow tired, discouraged, and reactive. With it, they become calm, confident, and courageous. God's power flows best through consistency, not desperation. When you pray in the Spirit, you stop begging and start receiving. You stop striving and start resting. You stop reacting to life and start ruling over it through faith. Power flows not because you are strong, but because you are connected. And in that connection, ordinary people walk with extraordinary strength, face impossible situations with unshakable peace, and carry heaven's power into everyday life. There are moments in life when you don't know what to ask God for. You know you are hurting, you know you need help, but the right words refuse to come. Your mind is crowded with questions. Your emotions are tangled, and every option feels uncertain. In those moments, the Spirit steps in and begins to pray God's perfect will through you. This is not ordinary prayer. This is divine alignment. When the Spirit prays through you, heaven is not guessing. Heaven is executing a perfect plan. Think of a person standing at a crossroads in life, unsure whether to stay or leave, to hold on or let go. Friends give advice, family shares opinions, logic pulls in opposite directions. Human prayers in such moments are often emotional. God, do what I want, or God, fix this my way. But when you pray in the Spirit, your prayer rises above desire and fear. The Spirit prays what God already knows is best. Even when you don't understand the direction, God's will begins to unfold with precision. A parent may pray desperately for a child, asking God to change circumstances immediately. But the Spirit knows the deeper need: character, protection, timing, inner healing. As the parent prays in the Spirit, God's will is released step by step. What looks like delay is actually divine preparation. Later, the parent realizes that if God had answered according to emotion, the outcome would have been harmful. The Spirit never prays wrongly, He prays wisely. In daily life, we often pray from pain. A person struggling financially may pray, God, give me money now. But the Spirit may pray for discipline, wisdom, favor, and opportunities that last. When you pray in the Spirit, you are no longer limited to short-term relief. You are aligning with long-term blessing. God's will may not always be comfortable, but it is always perfect. There are times when you pray for doors to open, but the Spirit prays for doors to close. You may not understand why something didn't work out, a relationship, a job, a plan, but later you discover you were protected. The Spirit saw what you couldn't see. While your mind focused on what you wanted, the Spirit focused on what you needed. Consider a young person choosing a future path. Fear of failure, pressure to succeed, and comparison with others create confusion. When they pray in the Spirit, clarity slowly replaces chaos. They may not receive a sudden answer, but an inner peace guides their steps. Decisions begin to feel right instead of rushed. That is the Spirit praying God's will into their life. The Spirit also prays beyond your knowledge. You may pray about today, but the Spirit prays about tomorrow. You may pray about visible problems, but the Spirit prays about hidden battles. A person may feel restless without knowing why, and as they pray in the Spirit, God intervenes in ways they may never fully understand. Accidents avoided, wrong turns redirected, unseen dangers removed. God's will was accomplished without announcement. Even in moments of weakness, when faith feels small, the Spirit remains strong. When tears replace words, the Spirit translates pain into purpose. When silence fills the room, the Spirit speaks in heaven. You may feel like nothing is happening, but God's will is moving quietly, powerfully, accurately in relationships. Praying in the Spirit saves you from praying against God's will. You may ask God to change someone, but the Spirit may pray to change you first. You may pray to hold on, but the Spirit may pray to release. Later you realize the transformation within you was the true miracle. The Spirit never wastes a prayer. Every moment you pray in the Spirit, you are surrendering control and receiving direction. You stop forcing outcomes and start trusting timing. You stop demanding answers and start walking by faith. God's will flows not through understanding, but through surrender. When the Spirit prays through you, heaven and earth come into agreement. Your life aligns with divine order. Confusion gives way to clarity. Anxiety gives way to assurance. What once felt uncertain begins to settle, not because you know everything, but because God is guiding everything. You may not always recognize God's will in the moment, but you will always recognize it in the result. The Spirit prays what you cannot see, what you cannot say, and what you cannot plan. And as you yield, your life slowly begins to reflect not just your prayers, but God's perfect will unfolding step by step. When you pray in the Spirit, something deep and unmovable begins to form inside you. Faith stops being an idea and becomes a force. Many people say they have faith, but when pressure comes, their faith shakes because it was built on emotions, results, or circumstances. Praying in the Spirit builds faith from a different place. It builds faith from connecti, on, not convenience, from surrender, not situation, from God's presence, not human evidence. Think about a person who has faced repeated disappointment. They believed once, they trusted once, and things didn't work out. Over time, fear slowly replaced faith. Outwardly, they look fine, but inwardly, they expect failure. When such a person begins to pray in the Spirit, faith is rebuilt quietly. Not overnight, not dramatically, but deeply. It's like reinforcing the foundation of a house while no one is watching. Storms may still come, but the structure no longer trembles. Praying in the Spirit builds unshakable faith because it strengthens the inner man before changing the outer world. A worker may walk into a stressful job where pressure is constant and appreciation is rare. Earlier, criticism would drain their confidence. But after spending time praying in the Spirit, something changes. They no longer react to every word. They stand steady. Their faith is no longer dependent on approval. That steadiness is not personality. It is faith built in prayer. Faith built by the Spirit does not panic when situations delay. A person praying only with the mind often believes as long as things move fast. But when waiting comes, doubt grows. Praying in the Spirit teaches faith to endure silence. A couple waiting for breakthrough may see months pass with no visible change. Yet as they continue praying in the Spirit, hope stays alive. Their faith doesn't collapse under time. It matures throughout. Patience. In daily life, fear tries to enter through uncertainty. Bills, health reports, future plans, everything tries to shake belief, but praying in the Spirit trains faith to stand without proof. A person may open a medical report and feel fear rise. Instead of reacting, they pray in the Spirit. Peace settles. Faith does not deny reality, but it refuses to bow to it. That is unshakable faith. Praying in the Spirit also removes the noise that weakens faith. Doubt often comes from too many voices, news, opinions, comparisons. A student comparing themselves to others may begin to believe they are not enough. But as they pray in the Spirit, those voices lose volume. God's voice becomes louder. Confidence returns, not as pride, but as assurance. Faith grows when the heart learns whom to listen to. Unshakable faith is built when prayer becomes a habit, not a reaction. Many people pray only when trouble comes, so their faith is always under construction during a storm. But praying in the Spirit daily builds faith in calm seasons. Then when trouble comes, faith is already strong. Like muscles trained before the fight, faith responds instead of collapsing. A person who prays in the Spirit begins to trust God even when outcomes differ from expectations. They may pray for one door, but another opens. Instead of frustration, there is peace. Faith learns that God's plan is wiser than personal preference. That trust cannot be shaken by disappointment. Praying in the Spirit also teaches faith to rise above emotions. Emotions change daily, but faith rooted in the Spirit remains stable. A person may wake up tired, discouraged, or unsure, yet still choose to pray in the Spirit. That choice builds faith that does not depend on mood. Over time, faith becomes a lifestyle, not a feeling. Even in moments of failure, Spirit-led prayer protects faith. Instead of shame destroying confidence, the Spirit restores hope. A person who falls does not give up because their faith is anchored in God's grace, not personal perfection. They rise again, stronger, wiser, and more dependent on God. Praying in the Spirit builds faith that does not retreat when challenged. Faith that does not argue with fear, but overcomes it. Faith that does not demand signs, but trusts God's character. Faith that stands when logic says retreat and rests when the world says panic. This faith grows quietly, daily, moment by moment, until it becomes unshakable in every season of life. There is a difference between wishing and commanding, between hoping and standing in authority. When you pray in the Spirit, you are not speaking as a victim of circumstances, but as one who carries spiritual authority. The impossible does not respond to human strength, intelligence, or effort. It responds to authority, and spiritual authority is released when prayer rises beyond emotion and enters alignment with God's power. In everyday life, people try to fix impossible situations by working harder, worrying more, or talking endlessly. A person stuck in debt may run from one solution to another, feeling trapped and helpless. But when that person begins to pray in the Spirit, something shifts inside first. Fear loosens its grip. Confidence rises. Clarity comes. Soon, decisions are made with boldness instead of panic. Opportunities appear where there were none before. The impossible didn't move because of money. It moved because authority was activated. Spiritual authority is not loudness, it is alignment. A quiet prayer prayed in the Spirit carries more power than 1,000 anxious words spoken in fear. Think of someone facing rejection after rejection, being told no repeatedly. Each rejection tries to convince them that progress is impossible. But when they pray in the Spirit, their identity changes. They stop seeing themselves as rejected and start seeing themselves as chosen. Suddenly, they walk differently, speak differently, and doors respond to that authority. The impossible responds because it recognizes order. Just like darkness cannot resist light, circumstances cannot resist spiritual authority. A family may be struggling with constant conflict, misunderstanding, and tension. Words have failed, arguments have worsened things. Then someone begins to pray in the Spirit consistently, not controlling others, not forcing change, but standing in authority through prayer. Slowly, the atmosphere changes. Hearts soften. Conversations become calmer. Peace enters the home. The impossible did not argue. It obeyed. In the workplace, pressure and intimidation often try to dominate. A person may feel overlooked, undervalued, or targeted. Earlier, fear controlled their reactions. But through praying in the Spirit, they begin to operate from authority instead of insecurity. They speak with confidence. They work with excellence. Favor follows them. Authority doesn't demand recognition, it attracts it. Spiritual authority also confronts inner impossibilities. Anxiety, fear, addiction, and insecurity often feel unbeatable. People try to fight them with willpower and fail repeatedly. But when someone prays in the Spirit, they are no longer fighting alone. Authority replaces effort. What once controlled them begins to weaken. The impossible stronghold responds because it cannot resist divine authority. Even sickness responds to authority, not panic. A person may feel weak physically, surrounded by negative reports. Fear tries to define the future. But praying in the Spirit shifts focus from symptoms to sovereignty. Strength enters the mind before the body responds. Hope replaces dread. Healing often begins internally, where authority is first established. Spiritual authority is exercised, not explained. A believer praying in the Spirit doesn't argue with doubt. They stand firm. They don't need to understand how things will change. They trust that they will. This confidence unsettles the impossible. Problems thrive on fear, but retreat before authority. In Mom, ends where logic says give up, authority says stand. A person waiting for a breakthrough may feel tempted to quit, but Spirit-led prayer fuels perseverance. They continue not because it's easy, but because authority gives them the strength to endure. Over time, resistance weakens. The impossible begins to bend. Authority also protects timing. When you pray in the Spirit, you stop forcing outcomes prematurely. You wait with confidence instead of frustration. The impossible responds at the right moment, not because you rushed it, but because authority allowed God's order to unfold. Praying in the Spirit teaches you that you don't chase miracles. Miracles respond to authority. You don't beg circumstances. You align with heaven. And when heaven's authority flows through an ordinary believer, the impossible recognizes its position and moves accordingly. When you pray in the Spirit, the first place God begins His work is not around you, but within you. Life does not break people from the outside first. It breaks them from the inside. Pressure, delay, disappointment, rejection. All of these attack the inner man long before they touch circumstances. That is why many people look strong on the outside, but feel empty, tired, and fragile on the inside. Praying in the Spirit strengthens that hidden place where real battles are fought. Think of someone who faces constant pressure at work, deadlines, expectations, criticism, competition. Outwardly they keep going, but inwardly they feel drained. Motivation fades, confidence weakens, joy disappears. When such a person begins to pray in the Spirit daily, something shifts internally. They may still have the same workload, but they are no longer carrying it alone. Strength rises quietly. What once exhausted them now feels manageable. That is the inner man being strengthened. The inner man is what holds you steady when emotions fluctuate. A person may wake up feeling discouraged for no visible reason. Nothing went wrong, yet heaviness fills the heart. When they pray in the Spirit, that heaviness lifts without explanation. Not because circumstances changed, but because strength entered their spirit. Emotional weakness cannot sustain spiritual strength. Praying in the Spirit is like feeding the soul with divine energy. Just as the body weakens without food, the inner man weakens without spiritual nourishment. Many people wonder why they feel spiritually dry, easily offended, or constantly irritated. The issue is not personality, it is inner weakness. Spirit-led prayer restores balance. Patience returns. Calm replaces irritation. Strength replaces sensitivity. In daily life, people face unseen battles. A person may smile in public but fight loneliness in private. Another may succeed outwardly but struggle with fear at night. Praying in the Spirit strengthens the inner man where no one else can reach. It gives stability when no encouragement comes from people. It builds resilience when applause fades. Con. Cider. Someone going through a long waiting season. Waiting for healing, breakthrough, direction, or restoration. Waiting tests the inner man more than the outer life. Without strength, waiting turns into frustration and bitterness. But when someone prays in the Spirit, waiting becomes bearable. Hope stays alive. Faith remains active. The inner man learns endurance, and endurance produces maturity. Inner strength determines reactions. Weak inner strength reacts emotionally. Strong inner strength responds wisely. A person who once reacted angrily to criticism now remains calm, not because they learned a technique, but because prayer strengthened their spirit. They are no longer controlled by external triggers. Praying in the Spirit also heals inner wounds. Words spoken years ago, failures remembered, betrayals experienced, these scars weaken the inner man. Counseling and time help, but Spirit-led prayer reaches deeper. As you pray, God touches memories without reopening wounds. Healing happens quietly. Forgiveness becomes possible. Strength replaces bitterness. Even temptation loses power when the inner man is strong. Many people struggle not because temptation is strong, but because their inner man is weak. Praying in the Spirit builds resistance from within. Desires lose control. Discipline grows naturally. Victory becomes sustainable, not forced. The inner man is also the source of courage. When fear whispers you can't, a strengthened spirit answers God can. A person may face a challenge that once intimidated them. Earlier, they would avoid it. Now, after praying in the Spirit, they step forward with confidence. Courage does not come from personality, it flows from inner strength. Praying in the Spirit strengthens you for unseen moments, times when no one is watching, decisions made in private, choices that shape the future quietly. A strong inner man chooses rightly, even when no reward is immediate. Integrity grows, consistency develops, character deepens. When the inner man is weak, small problems feel heavy. When the inner man is strong, even big challenges feel lighter. Life does not become easier, but you become stronger. That is the quiet power of praying in the Spirit. Strength rises daily, layer by layer, until your inner world becomes stable, confident, and deeply rooted in God's presence. When you pray in the Spirit, you step into a dimension the enemy cannot understand. The enemy studies patterns, habits, emotions, and reactions. He learns how people think, how they fear, how they break. But when a believer prays in the Spirit, logic is bypassed and strategy is hidden. The enemy thrives on predictability, but Spirit-led prayer makes your life spiritually unpredictable. Confusion enters the camp of opposition the moment you stop praying with fear and start praying with alignment. Many people fight battles by reacting. When pressure increases, they panic. When opposition rises, they speak carelessly. When delay comes, they complain. The enemy feeds on these reactions. But when you pray in the Spirit, reactions are replaced with discernment. Imagine a person at work who is being targeted unfairly. Earlier, anger would push them to argue, defend, and expose themselves emotionally. But after praying in the Spirit, they remain calm. They don't over-explain. They don't react impulsively. The enemy expected chaos, but encountered silence and wisdom. That silence is not weakness, it is confusion for the enemy. The enemy is defeated not always by confrontation, but by authority exercised quietly. A person struggling with recurring negative thoughts may feel trapped in a cycle. Each time they try harder, the thoughts return stronger. But when they pray in the Spirit, the pattern breaks. The enemy no longer finds emotional access. The mind becomes guarded. Peace takes over. Confusion enters where control once existed. Praying in the Spirit dismantles strategies formed against you over time. The enemy often works patiently. planting doubt slowly, weakening faith gradually, discouraging consistently. But Spirit-led prayer exposes those plans without revealing how. A person may suddenly feel strength where weakness once lived, motivation where heaviness ruled, clarity where confusion dominated. The enemy cannot trace the source because the source is spiritual. In daily life, the enemy often uses timing to attack. Late at night, early in the morning, moments of exhaustion. But when someone develops a habit of praying in the Spirit, those vulnerable moments become fortified. Fear may try to rise, but peace intercepts it. Temptation may whisper, but discipline answers back. The enemy is confused because access points are closed. Praying in the Spirit also disrupts emotional warfare. Many people are defeated not by external events, but by internal turmoil, anxiety, insecurity, comparison. These are weapons used quietly. But Spirit-led prayer stabilizes emotions. A person may still feel pressure, but it no longer controls decisions. The enemy expects emotional reactions, but encounters steady faith instead. Even relational conflicts lose their destructive power. The enemy loves division, misunderstanding, and offense. A family may be on the edge of constant conflict. Words are misunderstood. Tension fills the home. But when one person begins praying in the Spirit, the atmosphere changes. Arguments lose intensity. Peace enters conversations. The enemy planned destruction, but encounters unity. The enemy is also defeated through endurance. He expects believers to quit when answers delay. But praying in the Spirit strengthens patience. A person waiting for breakthrough no longer complains daily. They trust quietly. That trust frustrates the enemy because it removes pressure points. Hope remains alive. Faith stays active. Praying in the Spirit also shields identity. The enemy often attacks who you are, not just what you face, labels, past mistakes, failures. But Spirit-led prayer reminds you who you belong to. Confidence replaces shame. Purpose replaces confusion. The enemy loses influence when identity is secure. In moments of weakness, praying in the Spirit becomes a defense stronger than willpower. Instead of fighting temptation head-on, the Spirit redirects focus. Strength flows naturally. The enemy expected a struggle, but finds resistance without effort. The enemy is defeated when believers stop fighting in their own strength and start standing in spiritual authority. He understands effort. He fears authority. Spirit-led prayer releases authority without noise. Battles are won before they manifest. Attacks are stopped before they escalate. Plans fail before they succeed. When you pray in the Spirit, you don't announce victory, you walk in it. The enemy searches for fear and finds faith, searches for confusion and finds clarity, searches for weakness and finds strength. And in that unseen exchange, opposition loses direction, momentum, and power. When you pray in the Spirit, miracles are released in ways your mind could never design or predict. Human understanding looks for patterns, explanations, timelines, and logic. But miracles are not born in logic, they are born in alignment. Spirit-led prayer moves beyond what makes sense and enters what God has already prepared. Many people miss miracles because they are looking for something dramatic, but most miracles begin quietly, invisibly, and unexpectedly. Think about a person who has been praying for a breakthrough at work. They expect a promotion, a raise, or recognition. Nothing happens for months, discouragement creeps in, but they continue praying in the Spirit. One ordinary day, a conversation happens, an introduction is made, an opportunity appears from a direction they never considered. It was not the answer they imagined, but it becomes the door that changes everything. The miracle was released long before it appeared. Miracles beyond understanding often look like coincidence to those who don't pray. A delayed bus that saves someone from an accident, a canceled plan that prevents a wrong decision, a rejection that redirects a life. When you pray in the Spirit, God works ahead of you. You may think nothing is happening, but heaven is rearranging details you cannot see. In daily life, people often pray for immediate relief. A parent may pray for a child to change overnight, but the Spirit may release a miracle through gradual transformation. The child's environment changes, influences shift, hearts soften. Months later, the parent realizes something miraculous happened, not suddenly, but deeply. God's miracles are not always loud, but they are always thorough. Praying in the Spirit releases miracles that bypass human effort. A person struggling with anxiety may try everything: advice, routine, self-control. But when they begin praying in the Spirit, peace enters unexpectedly. Not because the problem vanished, but because God touched the root. That inner shift is a miracle no one else can explain. Miracles also appear in timing. A person may pray for something urgently, believing delay means denial. But Spirit-led prayer teaches trust. Later, when the answer comes, it fits perfectly. Had it come earlier, it would have caused harm. God's miracles arrive when they can be sustained, not just celebrated. In financial struggles, people expect miracles to look like sudden money, but often the Spirit releases wisdom, discipline, favor, and connections. A new habit forms. A better decision is made. A door opens slowly. Months later, stability replaces stress. The miracle was not money falling from the sky. It was transformation that lasts. Miracles beyond understanding often happen while you are busy being faithful, while you show up daily, while you keep praying even without emotion, while you stay consistent. God honors alignment more than desperation. A believer praying in the Spirit may not feel powerful, but power is moving through obedience. In relationships, miracles appear as restored communication, softened hearts, or unexpected reconciliation. Words spoken at the right time, silence when reaction was expected, forgiveness where bitterness once ruled. These are miracles the mind cannot calculate. Even physical strength can be renewed miraculously. A person exhausted beyond explanation prays in the Spirit and finds renewed energy. Sleep becomes restful again. Motivation returns. Doctors may not find a reason, but the body responds to spiritual alignment. Miracles released through Spirit-led prayer are often recognized in hindsight. You look back and realize how many things worked together, how obstacles were removed quietly, how answers came disguised as detours, how protection looked like delay. The beauty of miracles beyond understanding is that they don't require your control, they require your surrender. When you stop trying to manage outcomes and start praying in the Spirit, God takes responsibility for results. You may not see the miracle forming, but you will live inside its impact. Spirit-led prayer teaches you that miracles are not rewards for effort, but responses to alignment. You don't chase miracles, you position yourself for them. And as you continue praying, trusting, and walking forward, heaven keeps releasing what earth cannot explain, measure, or predict. There comes a moment when every believer must decide whether prayer will remain a routine or become a revelation. Today is that moment, because what you have heard is not information, it is an invitation to rise above fear, above limitation, above what logic allows, and step into what faith releases. When you pray in the Spirit, you are not whispering weakness, you are declaring a line. And you are not escaping reality, you are commanding it from a higher place. Remember this truth and let it settle deep in your soul. You were never created to fight life with human strength alone. You were created to walk with divine power flowing through you. When the world says this is impossible, heaven waits to see whether you will pray in the Spirit or surrender to fear. Because impossibility is not a wall, It is a doorway for faith. There is a well-known truth that says faith does not make things easy. It makes them possible. And when faith is activated through Spirit-led prayer, the possible becomes inevitable. Storms may still rise, but now you walk on water instead of sinking in it. Delays may still come, but now you wait with confidence instead of despair. Battles may still appear, but now you fight from victory, not for it. Do not underestimate what happens when an ordinary person learns to pray in the Spirit consistently. History is changed not by crowds, but by individuals who learned to kneel before they stood. Strength is not proven by how loud you shout, but by how deeply you trust. And trust is built in prayer that goes beyond words. There is a powerful truth often repeated in different ways across generations. When you align with God, resistance loses its voice. When you stop begging and start believing, heaven starts responding. When you stop asking, why me, and start declaring, use me, purpose rises from pain. Let today be the day you stop measure in your life by what you see and start walking by what you believe. Because faith is not seeing first and believing later. Faith is believing first and watching life catch up. Prayer in the Spirit trains your heart to expect God to move even when nothing around you changes yet. You may not feel strong, but strength is not a feeling, it is a position. You may not have answers, but faith does not require answers. It requires surrender. You may feel small, but remember this, small people connected to a great God release great outcomes. Carry this with you as you move forward. You are not alone, you are not powerless, and you are not forgotten. Every time you pray in the Spirit, heaven listens, heaven responds, and heaven moves. The unseen begins to shift before the seen ever changes. Let the world hear your words, but let heaven hear your spirit. Let your life declare that faith still works, prayer still moves mountains, and God still performs miracles. Walk forward knowing that what stands before you today will bow to what lives within you tomorrow. Because when you pray in the Spirit, you do not chase victory, you walk in it.